All right, welcome back to another episode of the Live Your Dreams podcast. I'm your host, Joe Gawalis, alongside my fantastic co host.
Chris Victor.
And today we have on an extraordinary guest, Chris, whose work has been illuminating stages from Broadway to international theaters and beyond. His credits include visually stunning shows like The Great Gatsby at Broadway Theatre, A Wonderful World, and a hilarious revival of Spamalot. His journey has been inspiring, and we can't wait to share it with you. Please welcome the incredible, inspiring Cory Pattak to the Live Your Dreams podcast. Please welcome the inspiring Cory Pattak to the Live Your Dreams podcast. Cory, thank you so much for coming on board the show.
Hey guys, good to be here.
Oh man, Cory, your story, your career is so inspiring. I mean, what's fascinating when people think of the theater world, people that are outside our business, they don't understand. They think there's actors, there's a director, and everything else just kind of falls into place. Most people don't know the nuances of what goes on behind the scenes in the craft. You specialize your life in a very unique storytelling environment, a unique niche in the genre. What got you involved with lighting design? How did you pick that as a young man to kind of start getting involved in that career path?
I know it's such a weird thing, like lighting for theater. It's like an unbelievably niche thing. I think most people in their lives have probably never met like a lighting design. It's such a weird thing. How did it start? For a lot of my peers, other lighting designers, I feel like they were like tech nerds. They were into like building things and electricity and it came out of a technical background. That was never the case for me. I could barely change a light bulb. Ask my wife. But that's not where my strength is. That's not sort of what my interest was. I really started with the theater, and I was a performer actually as a kid, and really goes back to like my mom like taking me to see shows as a kid. For whatever reason, parents they decide to enroll their kids in things, sports and music classes, and I did it all. I did the sports, I did the music, I did it, but I wasn't very good at the sports, and I was kind of okay at the stage stuff. So I just did more of that, and then we would see a lot of shows. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is a pretty good market for like first run tours and things like that. So even though we weren't coming to New York, I was seeing all the tours that would come through of the Broadway shows, and then I was seeing local shows put on. And then when I was old enough, I started participating in them, as young as like 7, 8, I started like acting and stuff, like little dance recitals, things like that. And then that just continued to kind of flourish into, middle school and high school. And I was acting, I was dancing, I was also a musician. I am a musician, so I was taking music classes, I was playing piano, I was playing drums, I was writing music, I was playing in the jazz band. I was like doing every kind of thing you could that was like theater related, music related, anything like that. And I thought for sure I wanted to be Gene Kelly when I was a kid. Like I thought that's what I was.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that's what I was. No, another Pittsburgher, by the way. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I grew up, like a 20-minute drive from Carnegie Mellon, which is like, kind of the epicenter of so many great performers. And I was like, I'm going to go to CMU. I had it all mapped out. And I don't know, at some point in high school, I was just like, yeah, I don't know if the performing is actually a good idea. I think I'm pretty pragmatic. And although I love doing it, I was self-aware enough to know that I wasn't like great at it. I was okay. I was like fine, like big fish, little pond. But I knew that when it became like little fish, big pond, it wasn't going to fly. I was like, look, I know what like, guys in the theater look like, and like I didn't fit the mold. And I also had a lot of like actor friends who were older than me that would come to New York and like kind of struggle. And I hated auditioning, I hated taking classes, I hated everything except performing. So I kind of like started falling out of love with it, and then at the same time was just really getting into a design. I'd always been kind of fascinated by it, but just sort of in the general theater sort of fascination. But I really started getting into it in high school, and scenic design and lighting design. And then I don't know, at some point I was just like, I think I want to do lighting instead. I think I could do this. And I didn't really have any experience before doing it in college. I might have lit like a little thing in high school, like some other thing, but I really had no idea how to do it. Or what. I just was like, I want to do this. I think I could be really good at it. And when I was in high school, instead of being a well-adjusted teenager going out on dates and like having a social life, I would build like little models in my basement out of whatever toys I still had in my house, and I would like light them, and I would film it, and I would make the scenery move, and I would pick
That's cool.
songs from different shows, and I would like create. I was also doing like stop motion animation. I was like that kid with
Yeah,
the
no, that's awesome. That's yeah.
I
That's
had, you
right.
know,
Yeah, I love it.
do you remember? Do you remember when our video cameras, you had to carry the VCR around attached
Yeah,
to the video camera
yeah,
with
yeah.
the
The news
VHS?
team.
Like that's how old I am. Is that was my video camera? You had to carry the VC around in like a messenger bag with the camera. So I was like always making films and stuff and little things. So I started filming these little shows that I would put on. I was super into magic, so I was like always like trying to
Sure.
combine magic and theater, like just like such a nerd. Nothing's changed, by the way. Still, so like when I went to college, I didn't have any real lighting designs, but I was like, I have these like photos and videos of these like stupid things I made as a teenager, and clearly, the folks in Syracuse, which is where I went, felt like, okay, this person has an eye and there's potential there, and so I just started doing lighting instead. Though in college, I still kind of kept doing it all. I acted and stuff. I
Sure.
directed. I wrote musicals. I like kind of, I did it all. And then, somewhere around, around graduation, it's like, okay, you gotta sort of just like knock it off and just pick one thing and be really good at that. So
Sure.
I sort of like barely do any of that other stuff anymore. But yeah. So then I just like college, I started doing it and like lighting as much as I can everywhere I could. Over the summer, I would go work at theaters and intern and assist and whatever. And then I moved to New York in 2006. And I have been doing this ever since. What is that, 17, 18 years now?
Yeah.
Um, I have somehow successfully been able to make a living being a lighting designer, which is kind of wild. And I always like, Broadway was always the brass ring, and
Sure.
it was like the thing it's like the end all be all for me in terms of theater. I always wanted to do it. I assisted on Broadway when I was in my 20s, and got a taste of it. But I always wanted to be the lead designer. And somewhere in the back of my mind, some stupid thing was like, I want to have a Broadway show by the time I'm 40, because I decided like that I would, I don't know, that was some like tent pole. And I
Yeah.
turned 40 last August, and I lit my
Awesome.
first Broadway show 2 months later.
Hey, all
That's
right.
fantastic. Yeah,
So
bravo.
like, I don't know, it's kind of worked out, I guess.
Are you kidding me? No, that is beautiful. Corey, what's fascinating about you is you mentioned you're a pragmatist, right? As a young man, you decided, maybe being on stage isn't exactly for me. You found your part of the passion that you still had, and you started creating lighting. That's a very, very difficult thing for people to do. Now, what you did, you came from Pittsburgh, going to Syracuse, then you happened to land in New York City to start your professional career. Being a pragmatist, that still had to be very risky and very hard. How was it taking that kind of move, going from the college environment where it's kind of a safer environment, taking that leap of faith and moving to Manhattan to kind of pursue your career? Because there's a lot of listeners that are young and beginning to take those steps. What kind of process did you have to go through to say, you know what, I'm ready to go do this and commit full time?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a scary thing leaving the safety net of kind of academia. And when I talk to college kids, I always say like, you will never have this opportunity again. You could like go to your theater right now and find a room for free and get your friends together for free and put on a show for free, and people will come see it for free. Like, do you know what I mean? Like everything will cost money. Everything will be scary. Like you have all these resources. You have musicians and instruments and theaters and lights and like all of this stuff in a school. And so I always say like, take advantage of that. Be crazy, make mistakes, try stuff, like be wild, because you will never have that safety net again once you leave school. So that's what I was doing. Like I wrote a musical senior year, I directed it, I played the piano. It's like, I'm never going to do that now, but like in college, like why not?
Sure.
So yeah, it was tricky. There were a couple things. First off, I didn't move right away. I moved back home to live with my parents for like, I don't know, 9 months or something, which was fairly torturous. But it was a good way to like save some money and earn some money. And so I was moving to the city with some money. And then I was working in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of theater in Pittsburgh. So I was getting credits that were not academic credits. I was working alongside professionals. So that really helped me. It didn't feel like it was like right out of graduation landing in Manhattan. Like I had like sort of a little buffer of just being out on my own. And then, yeah, I mean, when I first moved here, it is scary because it's like, there's a thing that I talk about sometimes, which is like a proximity. It's not an issue, but it's like everything's really close in New York. Like you might get an apartment on like 48th Street, and you're like, I can see a Broadway theater from my apartment. Like it's right there, and I'm right here. But like, what you don't know is like, it might take you 20 years to go one block.
Yes.
And like there was a theater that I worked at up in Connecticut called Goodspeed, a great place. Hope to go back there. I've done a bunch of shows there, but like I started there as an assistant many years ago, and I remember like being in the theater, and I was like, it was a small theater with not a lot of lights, with not a lot of budget. It was essentially like a college theater, right?
Sure.
But I was working with like really good people and Broadway people, and I was the assistant. And like somewhere in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I could just scoot over one chair and be the designer. Like it's so close. I'm so close to it. It's so easy. But do you know, it took me 10 years from that show to get my own show in that same theater. Like it took me 10 years to move 24 inches to my left to sit in the designer seat. And so I like that's the thing I always like have to remind people, that it's like, it might feel like it's really accessible and like you can very quickly just like move right on up. And like, but like, what you don't know is like, there's so many years of work that has gone into someone sitting in that chair in that space. That was sort of a tangent.
No, that was so actually. No, sorry to interrupt you, Corey.
Yeah.
It was so important what you just said, because that is such a realistic thing. People don't realize that as they're breaking into the craft, into the business, that's going to have to be their journey. They have to expect the long game. They have to love it enough to put in that time. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, but I think the reason I mention it is because when I first moved to the city, I needed some sort of survival job. I don't really have any other discernible skills. So like one of the things I did was like I sold concessions at theaters, at a Broadway theater, at off-Broadway theater, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I'll still be in the theater. I'll still feel like I'm going to the theater. So like here I was like at the American Airlines Theater on 42nd Street, like pouring wine and working coat check. And I was like, I'm 20 feet from a Broadway stage.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. Like it didn't matter to anybody. Nobody in that room knew my name. Like I was the I don't know. Can I swear on this podcast? I don't know. I was the fucking coat check guy. Like it didn't matter. And but somewhere in my dumb brain, I thought like, well, I'm in the theater, so that'll somehow like keep that connection. But it didn't matter because I had to leave that job, obviously, eventually, and work like 20 years to come back and get to design in a similar space. So like my point is that like when you come to the city, that you can feel like that it's like easy or accessible because you can just walk into these rooms, you can be so close. And now with social, like when I moved to the city, like I didn't have Facebook, I didn't have Instagram, like these things were not like really a thing, or they were just starting out. So like you had to like send a letter to someone. I mean, or you could like, you could find their email, you could send them an email, but you didn't know how to find like a designer's email. Nowadays, like kids just message me on Instagram like every day, and they're like, you know, can I meet you? Can I work with you? What school should I go? You know what I mean? Now everything's so easy and accessible, and I think that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong, like that's a good thing. But again, when it's so accessible, it could feel like that it's easy. That it's like, oh, I just do this, I email them, they'll give me a job, blah, blah, then I'm on Broadway. Like it doesn't work like that. Like you still have to put in the time. So for me, when I moved here, it was just about putting myself out there. I'm a fairly gregarious person. I have no problem going up to someone, introducing myself, looking them in the eye, telling them who I am, why I'm there, why I think they should know who I am. And I would literally start doing that. I would go see shows. I would go up to the director afterwards. I would go up to the producer. I would introduce myself. I had a couple connections from college that I would try to use, like, you know, can I light this show for someone? Can I assist this person? And like, really, it's just like ever so slightly, you just start like dropping these like breadcrumbs, and you go do a show for $200, and then that guy has something else, and then he comes and asks you to do something for $300, and then that theater is like, oh hey, since you're here, we got a thing on Friday night, do you want to come like that thing? And then like I got in with a little theater here that was like a cabaret space. And then I was like on their rotation of, I would just go in and light like a show. It'd be like, oh, it's the Thursday night. We got, some singer coming in at 8 o'clock. You're going to come in at 6 o'clock, and they'll give you a set list and you'll like light it on the fly. So I did that for like a year and a half. And I would just light stuff on the fly, comedy and music and bands and like all sorts of different stuff. And you just like, you keep doing it. You meet someone, you do that. And like, that's why I say to people, you got to say yes to everything, because it's like, everything is like a big Homeland style thing with red yarn connecting to it. You just keep saying yes to this thing, to next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. I mean, I can connect Great Gatsby, which I sort of consider to kind of be the highest point of my career at the moment.
Wow.
I can connect that in like 5 moves back to a show that I did, in like 2010 for like shitty money and no staff. You know what I mean? But like, I met someone there who did this, and then I went to that. Boom, bada bing, bada boom. I'm on Broadway. Like, it sounds easy. It took 18 years, whatever it is. But like, you have to say yes to everything, because you just don't know where that thread is going to lead.
I have a question. Would you say yes to lighting a movie or a TV? Would you have done that as a survival job, staying somewhat within the industry?
So
or is
the
it,
thing is,
yeah.
The thing is that, well, first off, it like from a lighting standpoint, it's really hard to go back and forth if you don't have those skills. If you put me on a film set, I would sort of have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I could pretty much like, I could point a light in a room and add another light on this side, but like, I pretty much don't know what I'm doing. And I'm pretty sure if you took like a film lighting designer and dropped them in a Broadway musical, they probably would also not know what they're doing. Things like clothes, production design, that stuff people can move between easily. There are very few people that move between lighting theater and lighting film TV. And the ones that do, the stuff they're lighting for film and TV are like theatrically based. So it's maybe stand-up comedy, it might be award shows. It's like still things that happen on stages, but you know how to light for camera. If I was like lighting a talk show or a film, I really don't know what I would do. I wouldn't know how to do it. And the other thing is like, you get pigeonholed really quickly in this business, and people remember you as the thing that they meet you as. I remember I was doing a show years ago. I was lighting a show off Broadway, and an electrician came up to me and gave me his business card. It was like, hey, I'm also an assistant, if you ever need an assistant. And in the back of my mind, and I hated that I did this, because I knew that I was just like furthering a bad practice. But in the back of my mind, I was like, you say you're an assistant, but you're an electrician in this room right now. And so you're an electrician. If you were to, it's, what is that like? If you invented Facebook, you would have invented Facebook. It's like, if you were an assistant, you'd be an assistant, but you're in so it's like, it's really hard to meet people in one capacity and then like meet them again and say, no, but I actually do this now. And so it's like why I warn like people who want to be lighting designers, and they're like, oh, well, I'm making money as an electrician. I'm always like, be careful. If you want to be an electrician, that's fine, but go do it far away. If you want to light theater, go be an electrician on a film set, or go do it for a fashion show, because you don't want to actually run into the same people. Because if you run into the same people, they're going to meet you as an electrician, and it's going to be harder for you to get hired as a designer because they know you as an electrician. So had I been doing film and TV, I would have been meeting those kinds of people, and potentially, going down a path that I didn't want. To me, it was better to like, nowadays, if someone asked me about a survival job, I would say like, do something completely out of the industry. Yeah. Like just have like go bartend, go temp, go, do whatever, do something that's like, feels like completely separate. So like, you can have the thing that you love that you're pursuing over here, and then the thing that you're doing for money over here. So no, I haven't really ever done the film TV thing. It'd be cool to learn, but like now I'm too old to like assist. So like, I kind of feel like I missed my chance. So we'll see. Hopefully the theater thing works out. I don't have a lot of other skills.
No, that was great advice for our listeners. I mean, really, you hit it right in the head, because I was wondering, would it be so like faux pas, something you wouldn't do and you answered it perfectly.
Yeah, no, really. That was really fantastic, because I believe that's true too in film or TV or anything like that. Even in life, I think people meet you, first impressions are huge, and you're going to get pigeonholed in that so early. So going on, now talking about pigeonholed, right? You're starting to get, let's go back to your career, right? You're starting to get the success in New York. You're starting to get some jobs. You're working in theaters. You're moving around. You're starting to get some traction going. You mentioned that you can go back from Gatsby all the way back to something in 2010 that kind of led up to there. Was there a pivotal moment where you realized in your career and you said, you know what? This is starting to work. This is no longer like something that I'm keeping on, is this a dream? Am I ever going to make it there? Like, I'm starting to really make a living in New York as things get more expensive. I'm doing it consistently, and now this has become my life. When was that kind of pivotal moment for you when you realized that?
It's a two-part answer. The financial thing is that I've been very lucky, and I think it's important sort of upfront to acknowledge that and acknowledge my privilege. I came from a white middle-class family in Pittsburgh. I was an only child. My parents were incredibly financially responsible. I did not have any student debt to deal with when I left school. I had academic scholarship in school because, as I may have mentioned, I was a nerd in high school, so I had pretty good grades. And so I was able to get a pretty decent, scholarship that helped. But my parents paid for my college education, which is amazing. I don't have any other siblings, so that money didn't have to go to anybody else.
Sure.
Also, when I was a kid, because I'd had some acting stuff, I'd done some film, some TV work, I've been able to stash a little bit of money in a bank account. So that had always been there, kind of like, earning some interest and things like that. Yeah. So when I moved to the city, I had a little bit of a nest egg. I think that's what they say. And that's never really gone away. I've somehow always been able to just kind of have enough money coming in between that and my savings that I've been able to sort of like scrape by. I also find ways to keep my overhead low, which is a separate conversation we can get into. But so from a financial standpoint, I always felt pretty good. I had some survival jobs like that first year, maybe.
Sure.
But pretty quickly after that, I did get a full-time job like 9 months after moving to the city in the studio of another Broadway lighting designer. And that was a full-time salary job. I was getting a weekly paycheck. I did that for a year. And so I was able to make a living doing that. And then after that, everything just sort of steamrolled. And then I sort of never looked back on the survival job. So that's the financial thing. The second part of like, when did I feel like that stuff was, what was like a turning point? It actually is a part of that that sort of 5 degrees of like that first show, which is that somewhere in the middle of the degrees, something happened, which was that I lit a production at In the Heights in DC for a buddy of mine who I had met on that show back in 2010. Like 7-8 years later, he was now a director. He was directing his first show. We had stayed friends throughout those years. We would do a show every once in a while. He was doing In the Heights in DC. He asked me to do the show. I said yes. The show went really well. I got nominated for a Helen Hayes Award,
Right.
which is sort of the DC thing. I lost it. It's fine. Would begin a long journey of not winning things. But I had done In the Heights, and at the same time, they were doing In the Heights at the Kennedy Center as part of a new series that the Kennedy Center was putting together, where they were essentially do these high-profile revivals, make them really quick, run them for like a week with big Broadway names. The original light designer of In the Heights was a dear guy named Hal Binkley, who sadly has passed away. But I knew Hal socially. And the woman who was directing In the Heights also was working on Hamilton at the same time with Howell. And people were unavailable to go do that In the Heights. And it turned out that Howell essentially said, you should hire Corry. He just did In the Heights in DC. He knows the show. He's a good guy. You should hire him. She hired me to do In the Heights. Kennedy Center hired me. I was a nobody. They were looking for Broadway designers. I was not that. But for whatever reason, they took a chance on me. I did the show at the Kennedy Center. That was in 2017, I think. And 2 weeks from now, I'm going to do my 11th or 12th show at the Kennedy Center. Right. So essentially what happened was I did that show. It went great. They said, you want to do the next one? I said, sure, I'll do the next. And then I just started doing them. And then I became the resident light designer for this series at the Kennedy Center. And then I started doing all these shows at the Kennedy Center for all these like Broadway directors. Spamalot was one of those shows, which we did last spring. That moved to Broadway. A director who also directs a lot of those Kennedy Center shows is a guy named Mark Bruni. We really hit it off. We did shows at the Kennedy Center. We did a production of The Nutty Professor in Maine.
Sure.
And then he said, hey, I'm doing this production of The Great Gatsby in New Jersey at Paper Mill Playhouse. Would you want to come do that? And so the rest is history. That we did that on Broadway. And so really it was when I got the Kennedy Center gig, I really was like, okay, this feels like the path to Broadway that I've been looking for. I was working with other Broadway designers, Broadway directors, Broadway performers, a Broadway producer. I was like, if I can prove that I can do this, these big shows under the gun, we're doing them really, really fast on a really tight budget. That was sort of the path. And then people started paying attention. People from New York come see those shows in DC, so more people were starting to see my work. And then that just kind of like that was the thing. I was like, oh, I think this might be the thing. And I was right. Spamalot was the first show that we moved to Broadway. It was great. And then I'm still doing those shows. I got one, like I said, in 2 weeks. I got one later this summer. We got more next season. Hopefully maybe more will move to Broadway. And that was really the thing that I think elevated me from just kind of like regional theater guy who nobody knew his name to like, oh, this is someone who's like primed to kind of make the we always talk about like designer classes. There's like different classes. And I was like, I would like look around and be like, I feel like I'm the next class. Like the people a generation ahead of me, they're now like getting more settled. Like there's the Broadway people, there's whatever. It's sort of like the herd has been thinned. We kind of see who it's going to be. And so I'm like, it's time for my generation. There's a couple of us that have kind of like risen to the top and are doing stuff. This year on Broadway, there were like 5 or 6 different lighting designers who all made their Broadway debuts. A lot of them friends of mine who I've known for years. And so like the new class is coming up, which is great. And but yeah, that was it. It was being in DC doing those Kennedy Center shows that really felt like, oh, this is something has changed now. And I think this feels different.
Didn't I read that sorry, Joe, didn't I read
Chris.
in April the Great Gatsby this spring? You started on the St. James Theater, I believe.
Well, let's see. So Spamalot was at the St. James. That was
Okay.
this past fall.
Okay.
We opened that in the fall, and then that closed in, when did we close? May or something, I think, April
Okay.
or May. So that was the first Broadway show, and then Great Gatsby we opened maybe like three or 4 weeks ago. That's at the Broadway Theatre, and that is running right now.
Broadway Theater.
Yeah, it's confusing because the name of the theater is the Broadway. It's confusing. But
Okay.
Great Gatsby is running right now. It's a big hit. People love it. Shows are selling out. We'll hopefully have a nice healthy run of that. So that one is still running on Broadway right now.
I gotta commend you. I saw a still. I thought it was like a Monet painting or something beautiful, and it was actually your lighting.
Oh, good.
Making the depth and dimension of the Gatsby mansion, and the when you zoom in, you see, oh, those are people on stage. That's not a painting.
Yeah. Gatsby's pretty. I would invite people. We don't have to get into on this one because this is broader things. But like what we do on Gatsby with the video and the scenery and the lighting, I think it's pretty cool and pretty unique. And I think we've come up with something that there's sort of nothing else that looks like it. And some people don't love it. Like that's fine. Maybe it's not their cup of tea. But like I think it's really sort of visionary and unique. And our scenic and video designer Paul Dupuis is a genius. And he and I have worked together for 14 years. And so we funneled all of those years of working together into this show. And that is what is up there on stage. And I think it's a great show across all areas, but I really think visually it's something to be really proud of. And when people see it, they're generally pretty wowed by the spectacle on stage. So it was a really great show to kind of highlight what I do.
Oh yeah, no, Corey, how does it feel now? You said you got to that class level, right? You're at that next stage in your career. You're part of that next generation of guys that are doing it now. You're in there, and then you do something like Gatsby, where you had such kind of like an artistic freedom to make something unique and new. Is that a good feeling for you from a personal standpoint? Say, I'm at that level now where I'm getting to experiment, do things in a little bit different style that kind of match the vision you're bringing to this new production. How does that feel that you're at that kind of stage now in your career?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that have run through my mind. The first is like we always make a joke when we're like in regional theater or off Broadway. We always go like, we'll fix it on Broadway. It's a joke, to be clear. Like we always say it as a joke. Nobody ever thinks their show is going to Broadway unless you're actually. So we always go like, we'll fix it on Broadway. And literally, when we were doing Spamalot in DC, nobody was talking about Broadway. it was just like a deep sea thing. We were making the jokes, this is a mess. We'll fix it on Broadway. So when we got to Broadway, I turned to my programmer and I said, "Do you remember when I said we'd fix it on Broadway? Like, we actually have to now fix it. We're on Broadway." And so it's a funny joke. But my point is that what you do realize is that, yes, you may do other, if your show's a success, you may do other companies, you might do a tour, you might get to go to other countries, but essentially it won't get it really any better than Broadway unless you are like a wicked Lion King Hamilton size hit that is going to like be around for generations, which very, very few shows do. Broadway is the top of that mountain. Yes. And whatever comes after it, you'll be heading down the other side of the mountain until you get to the like non-union one-nighter tour where like everything is like printed fabric. And anyway, so the funny thing about doing a show on Broadway is when you realize it can't get better than this. And I don't mean that sort of pejoratively, but it's like, if there's something that's not working or you can't afford or you can't do it, you can no longer say, well, you know what, we'll try it when it's like, you're never going to have this much money. You're never going to have this much support. You know what I mean? So it's like, if we can't do it now, we're never going to do it.
Sure.
So that was like the first realization of like, oh shit, this is it. It is like now or never on that. The other thing I like think about a lot, there's an Oscar Wilde quote, which I think about a lot. Which is, I'm paraphrasing, but he says like, there are two great tragedies in life. One is getting your dreams, the other one is not getting your dreams, the other is getting it, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot because I, perhaps irresponsibly, working on Broadway, designing on Broadway has always been my dream. And I have personal dreams, and like, I'm very happy. I'm happily married, like great sort of personal life, but like professionally, this has always been my dream to design on Broadway. And so everything that I did was working in service of that. Every shitty job, every bad paycheck, in some bumfuck town somewhere, living in a bad hotel. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was all in service of this thing right here. So now I did it, right? And it's awesome and it's amazing. And I keep wanting to do it. But there's a little bit of me that's like, okay, it can't actually be about that anymore, because now I've achieved that. Mm-hmm. And so it's no longer like, well, I'm here doing this so I could be a Broadway lighting designer one day. And then, it gets into all this sort of like spiritual stuff. And I'm not a spiritual person, but this idea of like, you need to find happiness inwards, not from external sources. Yeah. And I do know that is something that I am going to be contending with probably over the coming months and years, because I essentially did. And look, there's always places to go, right? You can have a bigger show. You can win awards. You can make money. Like, there are always new mountains to climb. But it is weird to realize like, oh, that thing that everything has been working towards, I've now achieved. I have to move the goalposts now, or there's no reason to sort of go to work and get up in the morning. So that's a thing I've been thinking about a lot lately. And I don't know, I'll let you know how it goes.
No, I'm very excited for that. Yeah.
That topic has been coming up about scaling up your company with other guests as well. You're right where you're supposed to be. Yeah.
And so I do think, I think it's like, there's some things with the show that's like, oh, I didn't get nominated for any awards. Like, whatever, who cares? I'm super happy with the work. But there's a little bit of a blessing of like, okay, good. There's still something to like work for, because you gotta, it's like that. It's like the racing dog chasing the rabbit, right? You gotta have something to chase. And there's an analogy that we often use in theater when it's like somebody gets a producer show that maybe isn't quite prepared, or someone gets a job. It's like, well, the dog caught the car, so now what are you going to do with it? It's like, oh shit, like what would happen if the dog ever actually did catch the car?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now what's your plan? And that's sort of what it's like. If you get everything, it's like, shit, now what's your plan? So it's good that like, it's good that there are things that keep me humble. So there are still things to work towards.
Absolutely. And I'm telling you, Corey, you are just one, a incredibly talented individual, and two, I love how humble you are to say something like that. I should be able to admit that to people of how
That is
that.
something no one
Yeah,
has ever
yeah.
said to me before.
Oh,
So
you are. You're confident, right? You're confident in yourself, so you're willing to get out there and talk to people and put yourself out there. But you say it with a humility and a realism about you, and you called yourself a pragmatist way back at the beginning, anyway. You know the way you kind of see things, so you could see your mindset of how you think. You're a very fascinating individual to be around. And now I know our guests are going to love to try to look you up, find out more about you. I know you have a website. Your website that you can kind of list for people, Instagrams, way people can follow you or learn more about you.
yeah, there's not a lot. I've got a website. It's just my name, CoryPattak.com. Same Instagram handle. You can follow me on Instagram. I don't do the Twitter or the TikTok or all those things. I think the internet's sort of a horrid place, so I try not to get too involved with all that. But I'm pretty active on Instagram, and like because of Gatsby, I've been doing a lot of kind of other stuff like this. I did a really great sort of AMA on Reddit, which I encourage people to go out, and you can find it on my website. But like really great questions from people about the business, about what it's like being a lighting designer, working on Broadway, how I staff my department, how I manage work, just like all sorts of really great questions. And so I answered a lot of that. And then, I used to have a podcast. I haven't done it in a couple of years because I got sort of busier being a lighting designer, which was great. But for years, I had a podcast, which was me interviewing other designers. And I did it for like 7 years, and we did 105 episodes or something like that. And so those are still all out there and available. And if you want to hear more, people like me, other designers from theater, they're just like big long form chats like this, and we just chat about the business, and that's called In One, and people could check that out. And that's sort of where people can find me.
That's great. I know people are definitely going to want to. And let's say we have any young, ambitious future lighting designers. Do you ever shy away from people sending you a direct message on an Instagram or emailing you? Do you look forward to that kind of things? How are you approachability wise if our fans said, you know what, we'd love to kind of have Corey take a look at what we want to do in the future?
I am super accessible. People message me on Instagram all the time. They send me emails. I try to respond when I can. The thing I'll say is, like, a lot of times it's funny because I encourage everyone to put themselves out there and be gregarious, which is exactly what I did. But it's funny when the shoe's on the other foot, because it's like I can't get coffee with every single kid that wants to pick my brain. I literally don't have the time or the bandwidth. And so what I've started doing, and I feel guilty about, but it's like, I get like, hey, can we get coffee? And can I, I'd love to get some advice. It's like, I can't do that. But like, I've done a bunch of podcasts and a bunch of interviews. And like, I talk about all the stuff. So like here they are, like go check them out. I'm not trying to like blow you off. I just can't I can't do like an hour with every single like student that wants to talk. But I do try to respond, and if people have like really specific questions, it's fun. I've gotten a couple actually recently that from parents who have like young children who are interested in this. And someone's like, oh, my child is like 10 or 11 or 13 or whatever, like, and they're already interested in lighting. Like, how do I nurture that? And I thought that was a really cool question, and so I've sent some pretty detailed responses to those, because that is a new sort of a new. It's like, how do you tell a 13-year-old like how to start like training their eye for lighting design? So I've done that. I've done some sort of like teaching things. I've got some like going classes, that sort of things that are on my website, through a company. I'm going to do some more of that this summer, maybe for another one. And so, I always encourage people to reach out, say hi. I may not be able to like meet up or anything. And, and then in terms of like hiring, I'll just sort of circle back to like what I said before, which is like, accessibility does not equal sort of immediate success. So it's like, just because like, yes, message me, send me your resume, but it's not like I get a resume and then like hire someone on a Broadway show. The people who I work with are people that I've typically known for years, or have used on smaller shows, or colleagues have used them and have recommended them. And usually it takes like, I start people on smaller stuff, or I meet them socially. To me, like assistants and associates, it's so much about personality. You got to make sure that you gel with them. So a lot of times I'll just meet people at social functions, at sort of industry events, and be like, oh, I had a really good chat with that person. I could see sitting next to them for 14 hours a day for a month. So it takes time to develop relationships with the kind of people that I end up hiring. And then when I've got people and they're great, then I hire them, over and over. But that does take time. And then it takes like proximity. Like, it's tricky to hire people who aren't in New York for New York shows, but sometimes I will go to a city and it's like, oh, if I know someone who lives in that city who wants to, who has housing, then it can be a great opportunity to like work with a new person. So it's great to know people live in other parts of the country and things like that. So yes, reach out, definitely say hello. Just know that, I can't, there isn't necessarily a private Zoom session for everybody, because at some point I have to design other shows.
No, Corey, that's so well put. And the fact that you're willing to share that kind of information, you're always direct. It works. People have to get out there, do the due diligence, but it's great that you do answer people. I have to say, you are a fascinating individual. What you've accomplished in your life is so inspiring. I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of your episode. Really, you gave a lot of great information to people. We can't wait to share more about you. And I hope the next time you have a show going on, we can get together again. We'd love to have you back on as a guest. You're a fantastic individual. What you share is really just fantastic. But thank you so much.